Before we go any further, if you care about real history, lived experience, and survival knowledge that actually matters, subscribe to this channel and share it with someone who still believes modern convenience automatically means better living. What you're about to hear isn't nostalgia or myth-making. It's a hard look at why people eating under wartime rationing often reported meals that were more satisfying, more nourishing, and frankly better than what many households are paying hundreds of dollars for today. And if you stay with me for the next minute, you'll understand why this topic still unsettles modern food systems and why governments quietly studied World War II diets long after the bombs stopped falling. Why the wartime food system forced quality over illusion. During World War II, food swaps weren't lifestyle choices. They were survival mandates enforced by institutions like the Ministry of Food in Britain and the War Food Administration in the United States. When sugar, butter, meat, and imported goods vanished, households didn't reach for ultra-processed replacements. They leaned into whole foods because that's what the system incentivized. Milling standards changed to preserve nutrients. Fats were reused carefully instead of discarded, and nothing edible was allowed to masquerade as disposable. The result wasn't luxury, but it was honest food. Taste improved, not because ingredients were exotic, but because meals were built around what the human body actually responds to: fat, fibre, minerals, and slow energy. Why rationing accidentally fixed nutrition science before it was popular. Modern grocery stores sell abundance, not nourishment. World War II rationing did the opposite. Governments studied calorie density, vitamin retention, and long-term health outcomes because soldiers and factory workers couldn't afford nutritional collapse. Bread was darker, denser, and more filling. Meat portions shrank, but bone broths, organ meats, and stews expanded. These weren't sentimental recipes. They were engineered solutions. British wartime studies later showed drops in obesity, diabetes indicators, and childhood malnutrition despite caloric limits. When you eat food designed to sustain labour instead of entertain taste buds, satisfaction follows naturally. That's a lesson anyone building a survival pantry today should take seriously. You know, substitution actually created deeper flavour, not weaker meals. Wartime swaps worked because they respected function. When butter was in short supply, folks turned to dripping and rendered fats. These carry flavour in a different way, and honestly, they bind with starches more effectively. With sugar scarce, cooks reached for carrots, beets, and dried fruits. That led to desserts with real complexity instead of just a spike of sweetness. And when coffee ran out, people used roasted grains. Sure, they didn't mimic coffee exactly, but they delivered warmth, a bit of bitterness, and, well, the ritual, things that mattered just as much psychologically. These swaps weren't about faking luxury. They replaced purpose with purpose. And that's why, really, they tasted better than modern alternatives filled with stabilizers and sweeteners. Why do local food networks beat global supply chains when things get tough? Well, one reason those World War II meals felt better is because, honestly, they were local by necessity. Victory gardens weren't just propaganda stunts, you know. At their peak, they supplied nearly half of Britain's vegetables and a massive share of American produce as well. Freshness, really, changed everything. A carrot pulled from the soil that very morning doesn't need any marketing. But today, Your $500 grocery bill often goes to transport, packaging, shelf life manipulation and branding, rather than the food itself. Wartime families instead paid with labor and planning. If you want to apply this now, even if you live in a city, the principle still holds. Just shorten the distance between soil and plate. Flavor, as it turns out, follows proximity. Why did constraint sharpen skill instead of killing creativity? Well, cooks during World War II weren't just improvising blindly. They were actually trained through public education campaigns, radio programs, and printed guides that taught technique, not just recipes. Folks learned how to extract flavor from scraps, how to thicken stews without flour, and how to ferment and preserve without waste. Constraint, honestly, forced mastery. These days, abundance often hides incompetence. If you can take away 10 ingredients from a kitchen and still produce a satisfying meal, you're working with knowledge, not just convenience. That's exactly how wartime households survived, and it's why their food often outperformed modern meals loaded with options, but, well, lacking intention. Why should modern survivalists study World War II kitchens instead of gourmet culture? For anyone who's serious about preparedness, those wartime food systems offer a tested blueprint. Store foods that require skill, not just appliances. Learn substitutions based on function, not simply taste imitation. Build meals around shared eating because morale mattered just as much as calories during the war. A pot of stew, after all, fed bodies and stabilized communities. That principle really doesn't expire. Try practicing now by cooking one meal a week using only shelf-stable ingredients and fresh vegetables. Rotate your fats, reuse bones, reduce sugar deliberately. And you'll notice something a bit unsettling. The food actually starts tasting better as your body recalibrates. Why is the real lesson not about the past, but about control? World War II food tasted better because it was honest, intentional, and aligned with what people truly needed under stress. Modern food, on the other hand, is engineered mostly for profit under comfort. When pressure returns, and believe me, it always does, the wartime model works because it already survived the worst conditions imaginable. That's why historians, nutritionists, and governments still study it quietly. It solved problems we often pretend are new. If this kind of deep, practical history matters to you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who still thinks preparedness is just paranoia, and stay with us. This isn't nostalgia, it's knowledge that lasts.